Welcome to Worldview Matters, discussing controversial issues, discerning current events, defending biblical Christianity. No topic off limits. And now, here's your host, David Fiorazzo.
Hey friends, thank you so much for tuning in. We are blessed to have Pastor Brandon Holthaus back with us, and you can get info on his church at rockharborchurch.net and also his ministry, Tip of the Spear Ministry.com, over on YouTube. He's got the channel there. And by the way, if you do, the first one I want you to check out is the interview he did with Frank Turek about a week and a half ago. Phenomenal. Frank Turek dismantles culture's biggest lies. That was an excellent interview, so edifying. And Brandon, thank you for all you're doing. Welcome back.
Hey, good to be with you, David. Always a pleasure, my friend.
Yeah, wasn't it cool? I mean, I haven't talked to Frank in years, but I've got him coming up next month again. But
he's great.
Yes.
He's just full of information. I love it, man. And he's got all those angles that, apologists have. So, yeah, it was a blessing.
He's been beating this drum for a long, long, long time. I remember almost 15 years ago or more, I remember something he said that someone's talking about Christians and politics, said someone's morality will be legislated. Is it going to be the left, or is it going to be a Christian or a biblical worldview or godly legislation? So let's jump right in here. You were up in California. Sure. The bill was AB 495. A lot of pastors, including yourself, Jack Hibbs, and others that have platforms, were trying to warn people, particularly in California, about this danger. And then there was an event, not surprising, a fair turnout, but not that many church leaders, because they think, we shouldn't be involved in politics. And then we'll talk about this other, just the IRS statement later. But let's talk about this bill and what happened there at the state capitol.
Yeah, it's almost hard to imagine that this is even happening. But this bill, 495 AB, it's always veiled in this morality that we're going to protect illegal aliens' children who get caught by ICE and deported. And so this will give somebody here in California the ability to sign an affidavit and take custody of the child. The problem with the bill is that the way it's written, it's open-ended. That means that anyone could do something like this. And so this is why this has been called a groomer's bill, or it's a pedophile's dream bill come true. Because you could basically go to the state of California, get an affidavit, not have to show any identification whatsoever, and take custody of a child or a teenager if they didn't want to live with their parents or whatnot. And you can see the scenarios that would happen. Let's just say you have a kid that's transitioning to being a boy from a girl, and yada, 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 and their parents are not approving of that. Well, then some teacher or some groomer could say, well, you come live with me, I'll be the custodian of you, and you can have your sex change, or whatever it might be. And this has been also named a trafficker's bill, because human trafficking is such a big deal in California. And so they could do this to kids, to runaways, to anybody. And so that's what we went up to Sacramento, which is where Satan's throne is, right in here in California, to protest against this. But this is the kind of stuff that comes in California. And people say, well, that's in California, and that's why I don't live there. Hey, get a clue. It's going to spread all over. The other states will get this idea, and they will take it as well. So this is a battle for parental rights, man. And so this is important. And so what the disappointing thing was, David, is, Jack, myself, and a good cluster of pastors that are typically always there in the fight were there in Sacramento. But most of this was grassroots. It wasn't led by pastors. In fact, there was hardly any churches here in town. I think maybe two in town that joined us up there. But most of the people are checked out. They're not involved. And I want to say, you're going to wake up one day and your whole world is going to be rearranged. And why? Because you didn't fight when you should have. And so anyway, this is still on the front burner, and churches are nowhere to be found.
And not surprising, but let's now slightly transition, no pun intended, but that came out the way it did. Let's talk about the IRS, and
Sure.
we can touch on the Johnson Amendment, but what happened recently shouldn't even be a headline. Under the radar, it floated because the media didn't want to touch it, most of them, that the IRS doesn't have any say in whether a church could endorse a political candidate. Well, most pastors are going, what? No way, because they have been unnecessarily self-censoring for decades.
That's right.
Since the unconstitutional Johnson Amendment in 1954. Right. And that, decades, and look at who's been influencing the culture more. Look at what happened in the 60s. God was taken out of school, prayer, voluntary prayer. Then we had abortion, that horrific decision by the Supreme Court, and Roe v. Wade, and on and on and on. And now we've got transgenders and men and boys and girls sports. And what could go wrong? But the church has not been talking about these issues. And Brandon, I know I'm preaching to the choir. I jokingly asked you before we got on the podcast, but let's go there.
Yeah.
So all this stuff is happening, and the church doesn't seem to be the salt and light that it should be. We're not influencing culture and all this other stuff. I wrote a chapter in my latest book called "What Would Our Great Grandparents Think If They Could Be Here for 24 Hours and See?" They would go, "What do you mean?"
Yeah.
I mean, just think of all the major issues, and they would be stunned. They would think they're not even on planet Earth. Your thoughts as a pastor, knowing the church's responsibility and how we got to where we are when we're seeing all these ridiculous things and these movements.
Yeah. Well, you're making a good point, because in July of this year, the IRS reversed and said you can endorse a political candidate. So tater chip, let her rip. I'm going to go for it, because unfortunately, I hate to tell you this, a dirty little secret about ministry is many pastors have been hiding behind the Johnson Amendment to say they can't talk about politics, which is not what the Johnson Amendment said. It said you couldn't support a political candidate. But anyway, they've been hiding about that. But now, hey, it's over, and now you can talk about it, so to speak. Not like you couldn't do before, but you can. And you can endorse a candidate. But will we see that? Absolutely not, because here's what happened, David. This is what led to this. It's the church growth movement. It's a seeker-friendly movement that invaded the church 40, 50 years ago. And the idea that came from Peter Drucker and C. Peter Wagner really was a communistic type of strategy to grow a large church. And it was typically a communist technique of gathering a crowd, pulling out of the crowd a remnant, and doing the power of a short campaign. And so that seeped into the seeker-friendly movement, the church growth movement, and the Rick Warren movement. And churches became more of we don't talk about anything controversial. Everything's a pep talk, to a rally, and we spend 45 minutes in doing music. And by the way, David, that formula works, and it does grow your church, but there's no theology, there's no edification whatsoever. You're just big and you have a lot of money coming in. So I hate to say it, it's all about nickels and noses.
Yep.
So will the pastors say anything anymore? No, because they don't want to run off people, and they don't want to lose the money that's coming into the coffers to pay for their multi-million-dollar buildings. And so it's going to continue, David, because that's how their game is being played.
Yep. Well, first of all, anyone can attract a crowd. And when you talk about building numbers, growing numbers, that doesn't mean you are biblical. That means you just know how to attract a crowd. You can become like the world to attract the world. But first of all, Pastor Brandon, I want people to understand, we haven't talked about this in a while, because I wrote my very first book. I wrote on the compromising Christianity, wrote on all these pastors. Thank you for mentioning Rick Warren. Thank you.
Yeah.
People don't know the history.
Oh, man, he's done so much damage to the church in America.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. We spotted this guy a long time. I used to be a Southern Baptist pastor. We spotted this guy a long time ago in the Southern Baptist. But obviously he went beyond that. And he was teaching people basically a Peter Drucker type of way of preparing. This is why
explain what
Rick
that
Warren,
is.
Yeah, well, the power of a short campaign is what was infused into Rick Warren's ministry. And that's actually communistic in nature. What does that mean? Well, it means that people will only have the attention span for maybe 4 or 5 weeks. And so what you do is you hit them with that message for 4 or 5 weeks, and then you change the message again the next 4 and 5 weeks. And you don't go too deep into it, you keep it shallow. And what you're trying to do is draw out from that crowd followers. Now, this is where 40 days of this, 40 days of that, 40 days of prayer, 40 days of the Daniel diet all came into the package. And Rick just put 40 days of whatever on it. And that 40 that's the power of a short campaign that communists knew. Now, that's different than going through a book of the Bible, exegeting the scripture verse by verse, line upon line. When you do a topical thing, you're going to avoid controversial issues that's going to ruffle feathers, whether that's a discipleship issue or it's a moral issue. So what the communists understood is, look, we don't want to offend anybody morally. And so what we want to do is allow them to keep their morals, but let's hook them with other taglines, that you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, you're wonderful, you're this, you're that. And so that then gets communicated in Christianese of God's got a wonderful plan for your life. You're the greatest thing. You don't need to change. You need to stay the way you are and just love yourself and accept yourself. And that's what came out in the messaging. And that became the hook. Rather than convicting someone of, hey, you know what? You need to step your game up in discipleship. Or, hey, this is going on about prophecy right in your face about a digital currency. Yeah. Those things were completely off the table in that movement. And that's what Rick pushed. And it worked. And that's why all these churches followed that model. And that's what they're doing today. Yeah. David, it destroyed everything.
Yeah, I wrote a huge section on the emergent church at that time. Mm-hmm. This was like, I mean, in the 80s and 90s, 10 years ago, when I wrote 15 years ago, whatever it was. But I want to mention the corporate model that the seeker-sensitive church took on. And I'm glad we're going down this. We didn't plan on talking about all this.
That's all right.
I'm glad we are, because we're talking about building big churches, but friends, we've got to get this out of our heads. Just because a church is big doesn't mean it's doing God's work in God's way and it is biblical. We have to understand that. Anyone can put on a show and be entertaining and have a big church. But I want to mention Bill Hybels, Robert Schuller, some of these other guys, big hitters in this movement. So the church, this affects why the church took on more of a corporate identity rather than a ministry. They became like corporations. And then, of course, you don't want to touch on anything controversial, right? And
That's right.
It's no wonder. Any other thoughts on that, Brandon?
Absolutely. So then what they did, instead of Sunday mornings or even Wednesday nights or whenever you would have church service, instead of it being for the edification of the saints, what they did is they flipped it on the head and made it an evangelism outreach. And again, let me put the evangelism in air quotes, because evangelism for them is it's not getting them saved. It's people in the seats and money coming into the coffers. That's what evangelism for them is. But here's the thing. So instead of edifying the saints on Sunday morning and giving, deep theological understanding and application for believers to mature, it became a show. And the term is worshiptainment. And so you go on Sunday morning and they're playing secular music. They have an Elvis impersonator. Some of these churches, it has turned into just absolutely a Las Vegas show. And live animals at Christmas and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. Pastors on trapeze, all kinds of weird stuff. And it's all turned into entertainment. Yeah. And they're doing Michael Jackson's Thriller, those kinds of playing Highway to Hell of Ozzy Osbourne or whatever it needed to do to attract people. But what they were doing is turning that whole model of discipling the saints or equipping the saints and saying that, no, we're reaching out to people. And what it really turned into is just entertainment. That's all it was.
Yeah. Most of our audience understands perfectly worshiptainment when you say that, because of this rock concert look and appeal to something that's supposed to draw us to the throne of God and prepare our hearts to come before Him, and then to hear the hopefully God's word preached. It's been flipped on its head and turned into something it was never meant to be.
That's right.
I always ask, when I hear these modern concepts like some of these churches are doing, I always go, can you please give me the book, chapter, and verse on what would support what you're doing, playing whatever, secular music, to draw in people. But so my follow-up question, Brandon, and I'll toss it over to you. So what happens then when you draw people in, when you are sensitive about what you say, you draw people in, attract a crowd, you got them in your seats, maybe they'll come on a Sunday morning, then what are you going to do? You can't preach the whole counsel of God. Go ahead.
No, you can't. You're actually very limited because however you attracted them is how you're going to keep them. So if you go into controversial issues, or you talk about Israel, or you talk about, hey, just basic discipleship, you're going to start offending them. And so they have to stay at this milk level. This is why a guy like Stephen Furtick at Elevation Church, same mentality, says, if you're saved, this church is not for you. He actually said that. And so it becomes a 15-minute pep talk, David, and you're great. Jesus loves you, and every day is Friday. So you get the Joel Osteen message, and that's what ends up selling to a lot of people. So they're actually going to church not to hear what they need to hear, but to hear what they want to hear about themselves. Yeah. And then what happens? It creates a bubble around them to pretend that nothing outside is happening to me. The world's not on fire. The culture's not going to pot. There's not a war with Russia and Ukraine. There's not a Middle East war. Nothing is happening. It's all about me. And it turns very selfish. Okay,
so we're going to really go in a different direction briefly. We did talk about the AB 495 in California and that bill. We touched on transgenderism, but there's been attacks, recent shootings, particularly the one in Minnesota. I wanted to get your take on. I've got 3 different articles here, so I'm going to try to condense this and then toss it to you, Pastor Brandon. Sure. One of them says the troubling link between psychiatric drugs, transgenderism, and violence. And another one by Linda Harvey at Mission America says transgenders and tragedy. And she says the body count is growing. Murders at the hands of gender pretenders. Are these confused people disproportionately prone to violence? Unless they receive help to walk away from these delusions, the clear answer is yes. And then we're going to talk about what happened in Minneapolis and what the media is not reporting, did not report. So, Brandon, there are many connections. We can connect the dots here. The left and the media and the Democrats don't want us to do that. But it's clear to see a pattern of what's happening here, and it is demonically driven, isn't it?
Totally. I mean, how demons work is they take advantage of people that are suffering, typically of mental illness. And so you'll see a connection between demon activity and mental illness, and because they're the easiest ones to manipulate. But here's the thing. Back in 2013, David, we said gender dysphoria, I'm talking about the American Psychiatric Association, said that gender dysphoria is a mental illness. And then all of a sudden, because of political pressure, wokeism or progressivism, whatever you want to call it, it put pressure on the association, and they changed it to say it's not a mental illness. Well, I'm sorry, you can say the voices in my head are not schizophrenic or whatever, but that doesn't change the fact that it's still a mental illness. So now what we have done is embrace mental illness, encourage mental illness, and it doesn't shock me then that the mental illness then will drive them to hostility. If people are suffering under mental illness and anything gets in their way, that becomes their default reaction to getting rid of anyone that stands in their way of achieving that, and especially if they're not on medication. But even if they are on medication, that doesn't solve the problem. Because if you're now transitioning and you're on hormone blockers or whatever they're giving you, testosterone, your chemistry is going to get so fouled up that you will react in negative ways and hostile ways to where you think that killing is an option. So that's the problem behind it. We're embracing mental illness.
Yeah, and it does lead to violence because they don't see any other way out. And it's almost like they want to commit suicide, but they want to take other people out. They're so angry. This guy, Robert Westman in Minneapolis. By the way, friends, I'm reading from Libs of TikTok. It says there is an epidemic of trans violence in America. This guy admitted, he said, I wanted to be a girl. I don't feel like a girl, but if I go back now, he said that I would have to admit failure. Now, I'm paraphrasing one of the quotes. If you just read his manifesto, and then you look at some of the things he put on, he talked about his radical LGBTQ affiliation, his goals to target Christians, his desire to kill President Trump. He's anti-Semitic. I mean, what else, Pastor Brandon? The media don't jump on that angle. They'll just protect his pronouns. Go ahead.
Well, it's a typical communistic Marxist reversal of the perpetrator, and the perpetrator becomes the victim all of a sudden.
That's right.
And, so they always change it over. And so you and I, the Christian, become the perpetrator because of all the violence that we've committed through our voices and what we say, and that we're anti-trans, and that's what causes them to react like this. So all of a sudden, you and I become the perpetrator, and the shooter is the victim. Classic Marxist move, right? But anyway, what is it? Think about this. Why do they want to go after Christians? Because the last few shootings have all been after Christians. Why are they not going after Muslims or Buddhists or New Agers or Hindus or anything?
Good
Why
question.
Christians? Because Christianity stands in the way of that. Christianity puts its morality out there and says, no, there's two genders, and this is how sexuality is defined within marriage, and it makes that statement. And so they know intuitively, and especially if this is demonically inspired, that Christianity is getting in the way of it. And so it doesn't shock me that this guy who was pretending to be a girl was taking target practice with using Jesus's head on it. And even the last one that did this before, what did they do? They shot up a Christian school. Yeah. So they go after Christians. Yes, Libs of TikTok, totally right. There is an epidemic, but they won't talk about that Christians are on the other end of being the victims in all of this.
That's right. Friends, it is okay to connect the dots if you're telling the truth. And just
That's right.
It's by observing the facts and what's coming out, because the media won't do it. Some of the leaders, the mayor in Minnesota? Anyway, Brandon, there's so much else, but we only have 5 minutes left. So what do you think about these? Some people actually had the audacity to criticize those who would pray for the for the families or for any tragedy. Just your thoughts on that as a pastor.
Yeah, it's beyond me. It's like, what country am I in? I thought this was, our foundation was Judeo-Christian, and we swear in the Bible and whatnot. And yet you got the mayor of Minnesota and some of these other people, Jen Psaki, and a lot of them out there saying, well, this is not a time of prayer and thoughts and prayer. This is a time of getting gun control. And the crazy governor or mayor of Minnesota says, yeah, these guns are coming in from red states. And, oh, yeah, okay, the gun's just walking over and falling into the hands of somebody and shooting. It's just so bizarre. But you know what it is, David? It's a movement of our country away from Christianity, and we have a bunch of reprobates, Romans 1 types of individuals who can't even think straight anymore.
Yeah.
And so, they're anti-God, anti-religion, anti-Christian, anti-Bible. And so instead of saying, you know what, we got a problem here, we need to pray about it and seek God's help. No, they are blaspheming, saying this is not a time to pray to God. It's like, what kind of individual are you? What's happened to our country? How did you get such a high office, as ungodly as you are? And it tells me something a little bit about the country, unfortunately, because somebody voted that guy in.
Yes, I was just going to say elections have consequences. And to these people, since there is no God, that prayer is irrelevant to them. They don't understand there is power in prayer. So the last couple minutes left, let's end on a positive note, Pastor Brandon. Okay. A lot of articles have been coming out about young people searching for truth, searching for spirituality. A lot of, I'm reading about these baptisms in California, these, I don't want to say revivals, but here's one article, Generation Z's conservative shift. And so are you seeing a trend? Is there anything that you've observed with the younger crowd that they're tired of all the nonsense and the, for example, BS, and they just want to say, you know what, there's got to be truth out there. There's got to be some sort of order. I don't get my rights from government. You know what I mean? What are your thoughts on the younger generation, Gen Z?
Yeah, absolutely. Somehow something happened to the millennials, but Gen Z is way more invested in seeking truth. Yeah. And we're noticing it here. I just had a young adults night on Friday, and all I did, David, was do a Q&A because these young adults are so curious and they want to know the answers about things. So we're seeing it as well. But here's the other thing is they're drifting away from Protestantism and they're going into more traditional Catholicism and liturgical types of churches. And I think there's a reason behind that. They are sensing when they go to some of these Protestant churches, just like what you and I talked about, that it's fake, it's worshiptainment. And I'm telling you, that is not selling with Gen Z. And so they're moving to a more liturgical, traditional type of environment and going to Orthodox and Catholicism and staying away from the seeker-friendly. The seeker-friendly doesn't appeal to them anymore. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
You know that's happening.
Yeah, I think they're smart enough to connect the dots and look at what's happening in our culture and some of the delusions, some of the moral relativism. And if the churches aren't speaking to that, and if they're kind of trying to conform to the world, some of these churches that they may be going to, of course, they're probably going to look for something else because it's not authentic Christianity. It's not Bible-based Christianity. Worldview matters, right?
It does. And even the presentation of what the church looks like inside or the presentation of the pastor communicates something. If the guy is in ripped jeans and a V-neck shirt, they're not taking that guy seriously, by the way. So that whole movement is going down the tubes because of what they want. They want something real.
It's interesting. I've got a little bit of hope. I was really skeptical for a while because of the millennial, generation. Whatever happened, we can dissect that for hours and podcasts. But what we're seeing with Gen Z is very interesting. I just want to mention before I let you go, friends, again, October 4 at Rock Harbor Church in Bakersfield, California. They will be live streaming the Prophecy Conference. Any closing thoughts in 30 seconds, Pastor Brandon?
Yeah, we're trying to reinvigorate, awaken the church, get back to being salt and light. That's why we're having this conference. And so if people want to live stream it, that'd be great wherever they're at. And we're trying to get people active so we don't lose our culture.
Amen, brother. I thank you so much for all you do, particularly trying to do what you're doing over in Israel. And of course, in California. God bless you and protect you out there. Thanks for your time again, Pastor Brandon. Thank you.
All right, brother. Good being with you.
Same here. Friends, God bless you. Share this podcast. And as always, keep speaking the truth about things that matter.